welcome to Have Your Say. I'm Ann Minicozzie, president of the Community Breakfast Collaborative, and I'm here with my co-host, Diana Robertson, president of the NAACP Mainline Branch. And our guest today is Jamie Mogil, and she's involved in many capacities in our local community. Today, our main focus is going to be talking about the mail-in ballot for the primary that's upcoming in Pennsylvania on June 2nd. So welcome, Jamie, and thanks for being on our show today, virtually in our situation now. This is our first try at our virtual program today. So welcome for this special occasion. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself, some bio information, where you're from, where you live in the local area, and some of the things that you do?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks so much for having me. And hi, Diana from afar. So I am a member of the NAACP Mainline Branch with Diana. I'm also part of the league with the League of Women Voters. At one time, I was vice president for the state board for the Pennsylvania League, but I'm also part of the Lower Merion Narberth League and work on their voter services. So I'm involved in the community. I also do work with Roberta Winters, the president of the Radnor League, and have been on the Mainline Network before talking about voting because I have a background, really the last decade, working on election protection efforts, having worked for 2 presidential campaigns in election protection, as well as 2018, I was election protection director for the state. So I do have that background working on these issues, and I am an attorney in private practice, including the area of election law. And that's my practice, Jamie Mogil law, and I live and I'm from Lower Merion.
Okay.
Great.
All right, good.
So we know that as of the end of the year of 2019, that there were major election revisions to the law, I believe is known as Act 77. Mm-hmm. And so if you could just in general talk about some of those changes, and then we're going to hone in on specific ones that we want to focus on.
Yeah, so the main big Act 77, I would say really first off the bat, is the first time we've changed our election code in Pennsylvania in nearly 80 years. So it's really important to note that this is monumental, and some of these things that we find revolutionary here in Pennsylvania, like mail-in voting, which we'll talk about, have really been done for decades and for a long time in other states, as it's our states that oversee and administer our elections. So Act 77, the key is they expanded mail-in ballot. Before, we really only had absentee. So you were absent for an excuse that was enumerated in our election code. But now anybody, so they call it no excuse voting, can vote. And it's as easy as going, and I'm going to say this website a lot, votespa.com. votespa.com. Go online. You can both register to vote, check your registration, as well as apply for that ballot. But it also changed our deadlines. So now that absentee ballot, we have 50 days, which is the largest in the country, to make sure that we get that ballot, apply for it. And that's really another way to access and make voting easier for all of us. But also the deadlines for registration. Before, 30 days prior to an election, you had to register to vote, now 15. And so those deadlines are really key, as well as returning an absentee or mail-in ballot. And that's 8 p.m. on election day, right? So that's got to be received by, and we'll be talking about that as there's some movement around the response to the coronavirus pandemic as to voting and elections have really upended our normal lives, but particularly with elections. So Act 77, really key, expanding voting access, mail-in voting. It did eliminate straight party voting. So that's where you have a candidate of a particular party. You would just fill in a bubble or press a button and you would vote for everybody in that respective party. That has been eliminated now, but I think we'll be okay about it. There's plenty of resources for people to be informed on their voting, and I think they can handle filling in bubbles or pressing for their particular candidate as far as party voting.
Just want to ask before you go any further, the history of Act 77, because I was talking to Diana, I guess a few days ago, and it sort of came as a surprise to me that we could file for a mail-in ballot, that this was not controversial for our state because it's something that took such a long time to happen. And then all of a sudden it just happened. So do you have some sense of the history? Like, where did this start?
Well, I think it is a power play between, unfortunately, voting and elections has become partisan. We've seen that, examples are Wisconsin with pushing their primary, even in the midst of a pandemic. Mail-in voting is revolutionary and new to Pennsylvania, but it is safe and secure. And I'll talk about some reasons why later. But Pennsylvania, there was this big push. We had people who are legislators pushing for universal vote by mail so that it would be an opt-out system instead of an opt-in. And we see other states have done that, particularly West Coast states, Washington, Oregon. And it's been controversial here because our legislature has not wanted that. But it also came with the connection, and I don't want to go too much into it because we could go down a rabbit hole, but really with the changes in our voting machines. So Pennsylvania, now all 67 counties have voter verified paper trail, and this is part of Act 77. So we see that maybe this was a negotiation, for lack of better words, or maybe a compromise between what is a GOP-led legislature to change our election code, which is part of our state constitution and legislation, and then signed by a governor who is a Democrat. So I don't think we got universal mail, but we came very close. And this really had to do with the voting machines, the funding for the voting machines. That's millions and millions of dollars for already cash-strapped counties. So the funding around those voting machines was part of Act 77. So long story short, we didn't get universal vote by mail. It is controversial maybe to some people, but I think that that's a lot of fear mongering and maybe fear tactics to really oppose and suppress the vote.
Okay, because one of the things I just want to comment on too, and when Ann and I was talking, is that we don't hear a lot. Like, I've not seen anything on television, radio, it's not being really talked about. And so some of the people, when we do talk to them, they actually don't even realize that there is mail-in, voting. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this program, because we wanted to be able to get the information out, because it's really not, unless you happen to know about it, or or in our position where we're making sure that what the information is and trying to get it out. A lot of people are not aware of the changes, and in particular, the fact that they have an option to mail in ballot.
Yeah, I'll say with respect to that, you are correct that nobody knows. I mean, I know because I'm interested in these kind of things and I track legislation, particularly around voting and elections. The state, you may have even gotten a postcard. The state government, particularly Secretary of State, and saying no, she didn't get one. I got one this past week. They have sent out over 4 million postcards about the Votes PA website, and they are going to be having radio, TV, social media campaign around this, Diana, specifically for what you discussed, that nobody is aware. Again, in Pennsylvania, this is revolutionary, but in other states, and even, the president himself was talking about vote by mail. So in other areas, this is commonplace. For us, we are not used to these kind of accessible means for voting, and it couldn't have come at a better time with the corona pandemic.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things I just want to briefly, before we go on, I always like to bring in a little bit about a historical perspective, and also acknowledging the fact that this is the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment and the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. So once again, when you put things in perspective of history in general, in talking about the voting has always been an issue, and for so long, trying to guarantee the right to vote for everybody. And I looked at we acknowledged the 55th anniversary of the march from Selma to Montgomery, and what that amounted to with folks, and it was all about voting. So once again, and it took, I think it was 4 months after that that the Voting Rights, not the Voting Rights Act,
Yep.
the Voting Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act came out, and so there seems to be a situation historically where that even with the constitutional right to vote, there always has to be some kind of enforcement or some kind of monitoring or something to acknowledge the fact that there have been several attempts throughout time to suppress the right to vote, particularly as it pertains to the African American community. And so understanding that is another reason why this information is so important, because of the situation we're in right now, where it's hard for people to, well, we can't get out too much, but not knowing what the situation is going to be by June the 2nd, and to just be able to let people know that there is this option. So now, having said all of that, getting into a little bit more detail as to how we go about the process of the accessing mail-in ballot.
Well, the key date, June 2nd. So the legislature and the governor signed Act 12, which is kind of a follow-up to Act 77, post-pandemic world that we're living in. So the new election date, and then all those deadlines subsequently change, is June 2nd for our election. So that would change both the registration date as well as the date for applying for an absentee or mail-in ballot. So you have till May 18th to change your registration, and then to May 26th for that absentee or mail-in ballot. And it's really as easy as going to, and I say easy, but of course I say that with the understanding that I have internet and I have a phone and I have the means. So for those who do have that option, votespa.com, they take you through a question. I don't want people to be nervous about absentee versus mail-in. You can't be challenged if you did one as opposed to the other. That's something else that was part of Act 12, and really make sure that we don't have litigation challenging people unnecessarily to suppress the vote, that they've applied for absentee versus mail-in. Absentee means it's in our state constitution, meaning you're military, you're a student who's away, you've had a work reason, and those questions will be asked of you when you're on the website. It's less than a minute, I promise. And you do need your ID. Now, you really only need voter ID if you're a first-time voter, but applying for an absentee ballot is really to make sure you have that checks and balances, that you are who you are when you apply for a ballot. It's not restrictive like some other states in the US, and there's litigation going on about that. You do not need it notarized. You do not need it witnessed. So you do need your PEN.ID. If you don't have your PEN.ID, it will ask you for the last four numbers of your Social Security, and that's just to confirm who you are when you're registering and applying. So it takes you through a series of questions, and you get a confirmation from the state that you have applied, and then it goes to your county, because our individual counties administer elections here in Pennsylvania. So Monco, when I applied for mine, it was sent to Monco. And what's really great, part of this new legislation, is that we finally have tracking mechanisms. So people should feel secure when they apply for a ballot. You can get a text version, you can get an email, and that's when the county sends you your ballot. And you can get that online as well through voter services on the pa.gov website. So I can track. I haven't got my ballot yet. Monco is just sending them out, so don't panic if you haven't gotten yours yet. So you can actually track when you get your ballot in the mail. And then even better, it allows you the option to get a ballot for the general election. So I don't need to apply again for an absentee ballot or mail-in ballot come November. One will automatically be sent to me, but you don't have to do that. I mean, some people are hoping, okay, I want to go in person. I want to use these new machines. I'm excited. I want to do my civic duty and go in person, and hopefully things will be better as far as the health crisis, but we don't know. So this is a safe and accessible and easy option. Votespa.com, the vote spa, as I call it, they know on mainline network. I've said it before. It's very accessible. Now, what if you don't have internet? I'll just say quickly, please call Google. Go, if you don't even have the internet, you can actually go to your county offices and they will give you or even send you, if you call them, a paper application. That's really important that you know that you have that option to call voter services, Delco, Monco, and they will send you that application.
Well, I would second what you're saying, that it was very easy to apply for the mail-in ballot, and I'm Delaware County. I like the idea that I was advised beforehand that when you apply for the mail-in ballot, use your ID. I use my driver's license, so you have the number on my driver's license. And then the 3 questions that they ask you, all of them, the answer should be no, which that was appropriate. And just knowing that that's all I needed to do, it took me about 4 minutes. And I really thought it was fantastic, like I hit the lottery, that I could get the November ballot
right,
as well. And if you do get the mail-in ballot, so the one for November, and then I decide to go and vote in person, they should have my name on a list the way that they would if you file absentee, at least in the past, and then you would cross your name off and file in person. So it's sort of like a good safety to file for the mail-in, right?
Well, that's a good point you bring up. What if you do apply for a ballot and you choose, even amidst a pandemic, that you would like to go to a polling location? In the primary, you cannot do this, okay? You cannot take your ballot that you got, your absentee or mail-in ballot, and go to the polling location and say, I want to vote in person now. Now, of course, you could always ask for a provisional ballot. Always, 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 no matter what, if your name doesn't come up as registered, whatever the issue, you should always ask for a provisional ballot. But in this instance, and you applied for a mail-in ballot, you're going to get one, you're going to fill it out. That is your vote for the primary election. Now, come November, yes, you're right. If you decide, hey, I want to go in person, they at the polling location, the poll worker will cross your name out, get rid of that ballot and issue you a ballot to vote in person. So you do have that option come November, but not for the primary. And that's really because we do have the pandemic, and part of the Act 12, which is the follow-up post-corona, is that counties can consolidate polling locations. We already have a lack of poll workers, but now, the average age of a poll worker is 70. We want to make sure people aren't risking their health and safety. So we will have a consolidation of polling locations come June 2nd. So really important, counties will be letting us know that about 15 days prior, maybe sooner, we'll have an idea, so that they're not holding voting at, civic centers, elder care facilities, places where there's a higher risk of a spread of corona.
Can you speak to our students, our college students, or those in that age group in regard to, because we've had conversations about, those who were in school and may have changed their registration to their school address because they actually had, polling places right at the school, so it was just convenient. And now they're not at school and schools are closed. And so for some, if they're back home, let's say, and in particular, if they're seniors, then they might say, well, or I've said, as I referenced my niece, so I've said, well, your option is to, now you can re-register
Mhm.
and change your address from the school back to your home address, since that's where you are now. And after you do that, you still have the option of getting a mail-in ballot, or, and you correct me if I'm wrong, or you can access an absentee ballot and then do it that way and maintain your registration at your school. So
Yeah, both things. I know, Diana, we've talked about your niece who is in college. So first, many students, unfortunately, their lives again have been upended. They're back home. Hopefully, they're somewhere, but they're not at school anymore. So maybe as a resident, that they were going to do first. Those students who applied for an absentee because they were away from their home where they grew up and they're away at college, but now they're back home. So they want to cancel their ballot. They want to change their address. Maybe they want to vote in person now. For Monco and Delco, it's pretty easy. That's the areas around where we are. But I would say this probably across the board for the other counties. Make sure you call your county. There are different procedures. The MoncoPA.com website has a form under forms that you can fill out to change your address to where you want your ballot sent, or cancel your ballot if you prefer to vote in person. So it's pretty easy. Delco, I would recommend calling them. They have a bit of a different process as far as giving information like your date of birth, your address change, if you want to cancel your ballot. Much of the same information that Monco is requesting, but they're asking it be emailed to them. So call your counties. Now, the other instance you brought up is, what if they had changed their registration to where do they go to school, which was your niece that we talked
right.
about. You do have time to change your registration, which is up until May 18th, which is 15 days prior to the election. So you can still change. You can change your address, but you could also request an absentee ballot if they haven't done that either. Sorry, I turned my phone off. Zoom, we're in the Zoom world now.
It's too much technology.
I got too much going on here. So you can still change your address or change your even your party affiliation. A lot of people, maybe they're registered unaffiliated, which is very common in younger people. They don't necessarily identify with Republican or Democrat, but we are in a closed primary state. So if you want to vote in a primary, you have to be part of the major parties. So you can still register to be affiliated Democrat, Republican for the primary. You still have time to do that. So again, checking with your county to change that. You still have time due to this pushback and these new, I think, more accessible voting standards.
Okay, so this is all good information. So what is your recommendation as to how we go about getting this information out to everyone? Because that's one of my bigger concerns as well, is that we need to get the information out. Obviously, it's much harder now because we can't physically get out and go to places like we normally would, and the places that we will put information or documentation, or they're all closed. So what are some places that you might recommend, or ways of getting the information out other than what we're doing right now?
Yeah, and even to add to that question, you were saying that the state was going to be doing some things. So how can we add to that?
Yeah. So it's a catch-22. Yes, we can't canvass or go in person places to talk about it. But I do think it's an advantage because people are paying more attention to maybe shows like this, or they're doing Zoom or FaceTime or house party app. They're connecting with people like this. Maybe they're talking. I mean, I'm talking to friends that I normally would not talk to because they're checking in on one another. So I think it starts with your family, your friends, saying, oh, did you go online? Because I went online and you could tell your story, how easy it was. And that this is available to us because, again, Diana, people don't know about it. And then I think it goes the next level, which is shows like this, the broader public. If you're online with your church, I know NAACP, we've talked about it. We're going to be talking about congregations, maybe if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, tapping into their Zoom for their services to just say, hey, just civic engagement announcement here, please go online. And of course, that includes the census, filling out the information about the census. And that's another way to connect with people. And I also think it's holding yourself accountable, whether it's putting it on your Facebook, your Twitter, whatever it may be, to say, hey, I know it's pinned to the top of my Twitter handle, votespa.com. And I repost it repeatedly because I want people to be able to see that. And in good government groups like NAACP, the League, we do a show. I was just talking about the same things. We have a responsibility to talk about those things and make it part of the conversation.
Okay. So, and you mentioned the census, and we certainly need to bring up the census as well, because that's critical as well to make sure folks are completing the census. I know I've had people contact me when I've sent out information, and they said, "Well, I just did my census. It occurred to me that I want people to understand and know that." Although we did a whole lot around the 1st of April, that we want them to know, well, that wasn't the deadline, that if they did not do it, they still have time to do it and complete the census form. So,
Yeah.
So did you want to say any more about the census?
The follow-up workers for the census are going to be coming out, I think, in June. At least that was the last time that they were talking about, and that might change a little bit. But yeah, everything's pushed back a bit.
But I would just say as final thoughts, because I know we're getting toward the end, it's really important. We've been hearing that mail-in ballots aren't safe, that how do I know where my ballot goes? Well, I've told you about a ballot tracker. I've told you how accessible the system is. It kind of helps Pennsylvania that we're on the end of putting this, administering this in our state, because we can learn from other states like the state of Washington, who for decades has had a mail-in ballot system. So we can learn from them, and we have, as far as how the system will go. And look, this is all part of us participating. We already know 4 times the amount of applications have happened. And again, it couldn't have happened at a better time for us, especially with a major election happening and Corona.
Right. So as we are coming to a close, I think one of the things, like I said, this is really important. We all have to talk about it. We all have to have the correct information that we're passing along. And so the more that we can do to get that information out, it helps everybody and encourages everyone to understand that the right to vote is critical. We want them to exercise their right to vote, and now they have options as to how to do that. And just knowing that our vote is our voice, it is a way that you have your say. Thank you.